Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host,
Brett
Gilliland.
Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
David, what's going on, my man?
Hey, good to see you, Brett. I consider you an old friend and one I haven't connected with in a while. And I'm really grateful that we got reconnected, and I'm here today with you.
Absolutely, man. It was fun back in the day. You know, we were young bucks back then, weren't we?
I
remember.
remember.
You were building
I
your
had a little
business.
more
I was
hair,
building
I
mine. Yeah. Mine was a little darker, I think. It was definitely darker and a lot less gray. But yeah, man, it's been good. We did a lot of work together. I always remember those days early on. I was a young, what was called at my old firm, a managing director, and was learning from you, and even did some work with your dad. And so think the world of you guys. So it's been awesome, and you've had a big part of our success. And so it's good to have you on the Circuit of Success. No pun intended there. But anyway, the people that may not know who David Schectman are, you are a partner of Evolution. You're a powerful coach who works with CEOs and high potential leaders in sales as well on mastering deep change, which we're going to dive into today. So, but before we dive into all that, David, if you could just give us a little lay of the land, man, on what's made you the man you are today.
Thank you. Yeah, great to be here, Brett. And I really do value the experiences we had over a decade ago when you were in the managing director role. I learned a ton in addition to supporting you and the others in those programs that we did.
Yeah.
You already did mention my father. And so that is, I think, a very unusual story that I've got. I actually came up through the family business. So I'm from the Midwest originally, a Chicagoan. I now live in on the West Coast in LA. I'm a winter refugee, so no longer shoveling snows, chipping ice off my windshield, but certainly have those Midwestern roots. So grew up in the Chicago area. My dad was always into human potential. He started in academia, got into social work, psychotherapy, loved some of the work, didn't like any of the industries. Decided that he really wanted to do more with people development at an era where that was not really all that common in a professional environment. So he was, I think, a trailblazer and just kind of entrepreneur in the truest sense. When I was younger, I grew up then around him, taking that into his own kind of self-styled business coach and consultant approach. One of his first big clients was your former world in Northwestern Mutual. That was a great entree for him to work with a lot of entrepreneurs and high growth individuals. Fast forward a number of years, about 5 years after I finished undergrad, he and I started talking about working together professionally. Neither of us was sure that was even a good idea at the time. Mm-hmm. Family businesses can be really challenging, and it was really challenging, but it was also a very positive experience for both of us. So I joined him at a relatively young age, didn't have a whole lot of experience or training in coaching or consulting at all. Found myself in a meeting then, which was sort of a kind of test the waters, put him in the pool, see if he can swim kind of moment. And thankfully, I passed the test, even though I was at that point probably 26 or 27. I was able to add value with entrepreneurs. I think bring a lot of very good ambition, desire, helpfulness, adaptability, and got asked to come back. So at that point, started building a coaching and consulting practice under the umbrella of my dad's business. And that was also a time when I was getting a lot of firsthand exposure to Southern California. So I just started working on developing more clients in this space, also working on my wife to see if she'd agree to move out here. And those were both two very challenging endeavors.
The best sales of your life.
That's right. Exactly. Thankfully, I was successful in both. So built a business with a lot of entrepreneurs doing some individual coaching, some group coaching, and some traditional consulting. And finally, as soon as we started our family, my wife accepted this chance to move out to the West Coast. And so we did. I was out here about 9, 10 months, and I had the like, oh crap moment. Like, what have I done? What did I put my
Yeah.
family? What kind of position did I put my family into? What am I doing? Did I really think this through before I came out? I'm sure, that sort of like fetal position moment that most entrepreneurs go
Yeah.
through multiple times on their journey, and said to myself, I need more. I just am not, this is more expensive, competitive, challenging than I expected it to be. Decided grad school was something I needed to do, and looked at a number of different programs, landed on one at Pepperdine. It was a master's in organization development. Got into that program, and it just was, exactly what I wanted. I know grad school is perfect for some people, not in the cards for others. This happened to be a very unique grad school program, so I wasn't just buying, time in a building or something, taking
Yeah.
notes. This had a lot of travel around the world. It was a cohort environment, just delivered exactly what I was hoping for. The content, networks, experiences. So I came out of that just in time for the world to collapse in 2008 with the Great Recession that kicked off 6 weeks, I think, after I walked the stage and graduated. That was a very challenging time, and also turned out to be, in the end, a great opportunity for me to move out of the family business. Just was the right time for me. Left, went out on my own. And I think about a year or two after that was when we would have first worked together in some of those leadership development programs.
Hmm.
I was on my own about 6 years, and then got a call in the summer of 2015 from one of my grad school buddies. He was kind of my best friend throughout the program. We roomed together. I ended up being in his wedding. We were very, very close. And he was leaving an internal consulting role that he had stepped into, going out on his own, and along with a colleague had identified really big growth opportunities in some Silicon Valley startups that were really taking off, rocket ships that were experiencing liftoff. And he said, I would love to work together, and we need trusted coaches, people who can operate at a very high level and represent the firm well, et cetera. And would you be interested in collaborating? And I said, like, how fast can I say yes to that
Yeah.
opportunity? So met him in the summer of 2015. It was downtown San Francisco, and it was with a meeting for Slack, which has gone on to go public, and it was merged with Salesforce.com not too long ago. And that was really the impetus for me to step fully into this new emerging organization with my good buddy. Accepted an equity partner contract. I am a founding partner in this firm, Evolution. I continue to work with many of the same people and industries as my sort of legacy businesses, I call it, when you and I would have first met. And I've added tech startup coaching and consulting, as well as some other industries in the last 7 or 8 years. So it's been quite a ride. I love the fact that I'm a legacy in this business, which is very unusual. It feels like it's really a part of my DNA and identity to do this work. And I'm so thrilled that I've continued to grow, maintain relationships I love, and then add new exciting fields and people that I wouldn't have dreamed possible when I first started.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thanks for sharing all that. That's a lot. There's a lot there, and it's been a good ride. And I think I would assume today's environment is a little easier when you bring up the word coaching, right? And this emotional intelligence and all this stuff. Because I remember actually meeting with your dad, and I was probably 22, 23 years old, and they said there's this guy going to come in and talk about like your feelings and emotions, and I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, yeah, here I am, this 23-year-old kid right out of college, and I'm like we don't do this, but it opens your eyes, right? And so I have to think that coaching now today is different, right? It's more, people are more open to it. Is that fair?
Yeah. By the way, that reaction you had was describes a lot of my childhood. So yeah,
Like,
I
what?
know that feeling.
Dad, I'm 13.
Right.
I'm not going to talk about my feelings.
What are we talking about? I'm 14. I want to go to a party.
Yeah.
So I definitely know that feeling. It's interesting. No one has asked me that question recently about how coaching. So it's an interesting thing to think about. I would say that the environment is far more open to coaching than the early days. I mean, the early days, I'd get on a plane to go to a client meeting, and a person sitting next to me on the flight would say, "What do you do?" And I'd say, "Coaching." And they'd say, "Okay, is that football? Is that basketball?" I'd say,
Yeah.
"No, no, no. Professional, executive coaching." Like they're just, for most people, it just, those dots
Yeah.
did not connect. So clearly people are more open to that in the business environment. So certainly in that way, yes. But the challenges that clients deal with on a regular basis are exponentially harder than the early days. I mean, it felt like just helping people with mindset was a big deal, in that era you were talking about 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Just presenting a new way to look at something was a pretty revolutionary idea. Now, if that's all I'm doing with my clients, like they can use Jet GPT for that, right? They don't even need a
Right.
human to start, questioning their thinking. So my ability to connect deeply with people, challenge their thinking, but also help them execute, that's got to be there. Otherwise, I'm not a valuable resource. And that is a completely different ballgame from my early days.
Yeah, that's good perspective. Good way to look at that, because they are, man. The issues are much deeper now. And so when you say that, like that word deep change, it's like, what does that mean to you, and how can you explain that to our listeners?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's really one of my favorite concepts. I came across this going back to the story I told a minute ago in grad school, a book called Deep Change. It's not at all new. I mean, at this point, it's probably 30 years old. And to me, deep change is one of these concepts that is relatively easy to understand, but incredibly difficult and challenging to execute on. And so the way to think about this is you have two different types of change. It's a little bit reductive to think of it that way, but two broad categories. One would be incremental change, and that is really minor shifts in a particular direction. Um, Incremental change is not bad. I'm doing incremental change every single day of my life. I'm looking at how I show up, what I do, what systems I have, what processes I engage in, and I'm continuously trying to improve them. But that's only one form. The other is deep change, and that is looking at changes that are discontinuous with the past, major in scope, and typically irreversible. When I chose to become a coach, that was a deep change. When I chose to go to graduate school, that was a deep change. When I chose to leave my dad's organization, that was a deep change. When I chose to join Evolution, this my current firm, that was definitely a deep change, as well as plenty of others that that have happened in my life. And I think that when people are considering coaching work, I think deep change is where the value is. And again, I'm not downplaying incremental change. It's an important part of everyone's life. But when people are going to be spending a significant amount of money making massive capital investments in their own growth and development, I think deep change is where the payoff is.
Yeah. And so like, let's peel that onion layer back more. So like what does that look like? So let's assume that, we're in a coaching session right now, and you're
Yeah.
helping me with maybe an issue or something that I have at work, but you're probably also diving into me as a human being and getting in. I
Yeah.
always say everybody's got only you can give me the keys to unplug that Pandora's box you've got, right?
Yes.
And I can
Yes.
open that key, and that's what we try to do with our clients, right? Is open that Pandora's box of what's something that's meaningful and purposeful for them. And I'm
That's right.
assuming that conversation. So are there any specific practices or strategies, things like that you can help us with today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am going to take a big risk here and attempt to explain a framework here, which is always
Okay.
a little bit of a joke here, right? Consultants and coaches and their frameworks and models. And I realize we're also doing this in a podcast, or many people are going to be consuming this as audio only.
Yeah.
But I believe it's going to work because it's a very simple way of looking at a person's situation. So what I want you and the listeners to consider here is 3 different aspects of a person's situation: be,
Okay.
do, and have. So
You see me
be,
looking down. I'm just taking notes. I'm not.
of course,
So be, do, and have.
that's right. Right. So be is the dimension of a person's situation that is internal, subjective, intangible. Belief systems, mindsets, values, mental models. People use a lot of different language to describe this. I can't see your values. I can't see, touch, track your beliefs, but I know they're there, and I realize that they're extremely important. So that's one dimension. The next is do, and this would be the polar opposite of that. Things that are measurable, observable, objective in nature. So that would be actions, behaviors, routines, rituals. I know your background and a lot of work you've done is just measured, right? Everything's measured.
Yeah.
Your activities measured, your production is measured, your tracking systems that are endless, and that's a very critical and crucial part of an individual situation. That then or then we move to the third dimension here, which is have, and that's a combination of the two, but it's the results. Some of those results could be tangible and objective. Some could be very intangible, internal and subjective. So results in people's lives, what they earn, their lifestyle, a sense of fulfillment, happiness, contentment, those are all in the have category. So the way to think about this from a shorthand perspective is that beliefs drive behaviors and behaviors drive results. That's a very inside out way of looking at the world. Not everyone agrees with that, but that is the school of thought that I come from. So when people reach out to me and want to do coaching, or probably reach out to most other coaches, considering that framework, Brett, they have a lot of clarity on the results they're looking for. They tend to know the have.
Yeah. The have
They
is
want
easy
to
to
make,
know.
yeah, it's right. And there's usually some discomfort that they feel about the current results in their situation. They want to earn more money. They want to take more time off. They want to feel better about what they do, have a sense
Yeah.
of, fulfillment in relationships. So what do they naturally then ask a coach or a supporting resource? What do I need to do to get there?
Yep.
And in my experience, by the way, that's a very reasonable question to ask, and it's pretty smart. If that's where it ends, I think incremental change is the limit of what that individual, that client is going to experience. There's not likely going to be any transformational change that happens because to some degree, people don't even need a coach for that. You can get a book. There's self-help section, is endless amount of resources sharing ideas, best practices, and success formulas that have worked for other people. And those are all good and helpful things. And I think a coach can be a good guide sometimes in pointing those resources out and helping people get comfortable with them. But don't expect there to be meaningful, long-lasting, sustainable change that's significant from that.
Because people are
So for
looking for
me,
exponential growth, right? I mean, you're not going to hire a coach for incremental changing.
well, some
At least
people
I
might,
wouldn't.
but I
Yeah.
don't think that's a great, yeah, certainly not me, but I don't think that's a great investment of resources. Just go buy a book off of Amazon that has the behavior you want to do. What's really going to, I think, lead to deep change, transformational experiences, and a sense of return on investment in hiring a coach is to go farther back past the do dimension and into be. What are the beliefs that are driving your behaviors and delivering your results? That is a deeper inquiry than most people are sometimes used to or other times even want. This is why deep change is more rare and more difficult, because a person like me is not just saying, what are you doing? Try to do it differently, or try this technique, or try that approach. I'm saying, what is your belief about success? What is your belief about the market? What is your belief about clients? What is your belief about yourself?
Hmm.
And those are areas that not a lot of people have experience sometimes going through, or feel comfortable in, because it's very disorienting to begin to do that kind of self-examination, self-inquiry, and it's very hard to shift beliefs.
Yeah.
It's people tend to be very, very driven by what's known and predictable, and what they've always thought, or how they've always seen
It's
themselves or
what you've
seen
grown
the
up with,
world.
right? I mean, it's what you've grown up with, and until you dive into that, it's you kind of think this one way.
Exactly. And that tends to be an enormous limit or lid on people's success.
Yeah.
And so the mistaken belief that I see all the time is that people think that exposure to new activity based ideas are going to, on their own, deliver dramatic results. I don't think they are. What I think will do that is a deeper exploration of beliefs, mindsets, values, mental models,
Mm-hmm.
but that creates a disorientation in people. And for me, if people are willing to go there and experience that disorientation, sometimes disruption in patterns that they've long held, that's the work that unlocks major deep change,
Yeah.
transformational experiences, and exponentially higher results.
Hmm. I love that. So on the B part, so are you seeing anything out there that is like the common quote unquote mistake, maybe, or the new learning that we need to have as people to be in deep change? Is there a common theme that you're seeing that probably our listeners are dealing with as well, that is a, I don't want to say an easy fix, because there's no easy fix, but is there anything out there that you're seeing consistently?
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously, there's a lot of personalization and uniqueness,
Sure.
because everyone's got a slightly different story and set of experiences. I know that you work with a lot of people who are in professional services. People who are doing financial advisory work, legal work, consulting, maybe accounting work, folks who are business owners, and so I personally have found, through working with a lot of the same people in those similar industries, that there are lots of mistaken beliefs around what value is to people.
Hmm.
And there's definitely a self component in that, but let me unpack it a little bit more. So first off, I think a lot of people believe that providing information, or being friendly to people, is where the value is, or simply following through on an order, delivering or on a request that people have, and so a lot of beliefs then that support that come from avoiding conflict, come from being incredibly wonderful to deal with, or easy to deal with, or friendly, or even just being kind of accepted, by the client or the prospect that the individual is talking to. And there's some grain of truth, or there's some aspect of that of course is in place. When someone is hiring a financial advisor or an attorney, they're not looking for an adversarial personality, or
Right.
someone who's looking to stir up trouble or be difficult to deal with. But I think that there's often a people pleasing dimension of that takes over and turns the relationship into one that really doesn't add a lot of value, and maybe most tragically doesn't provide much leadership. And so for me, when I think about people who are in those sorts of roles, whether it's externally with a client or even internally with an employee, uh, I believe that a mindset of leadership, of communicating in ways where people are being both supported and challenged is a gigantic unlock for value delivery and growth. And I think that what goes into that's a little bit different, maybe even than some of your early experiences talking to my dad, talking to me, is that that whole experience ends up being very polarizing. And I think that people can often experience other professionals, again, whether this is a boss or this is a financial advisor or an attorney, some expert they've hired, as this person is going to be either my best friend or my worst enemy, right? This person is going to be happy, chirpy, supportive, or this person's going to grill me, get in my face, and challenge me to do more. And I don't think either of those extremes is the way to go. And I think that oftentimes the mental models that people in those roles are carrying lead folks into one of those extreme positions.
Yeah.
And what happens when you end up in those in that kind of extreme position is you blindside people all the time, right? This person's always been wonderful, warm, friendly to deal with, and all of a sudden I'm dealing with this challenging, confrontational person, or this person's been a kind of bull in the china shop, awful, all the time, and now suddenly I'm dealing with this warm, fuzzy personality. And one thing I've learned, certainly from being a parent, even beyond any kind of professional experiences I've had, is that tough love works.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
I like to let my clients know that I care deeply about them and I'm invested in their success, and I'd like to have positive interactions with them. It's very important to me.
I think
And
so too. Sorry to interrupt. I mean, we did this
please,
exercise. It may have been actually back in the day with you or your dad or somebody, but writing down. I think it's hard to challenge because I think as humans we want to be liked, right? We don't want to be the kind of the jerk boss or whatever. So it's hard to challenge. But we wrote down in this exercise who was the person that challenged you the most, right? And I think back to my early days of my wife, right? I joked that I may still be in college if I didn't meet my wife, right? It's like, so
yeah.
she really helped me buckle down and study and challenge my thinking. And while that was tough love, it's also the person that loves me the most, right? And so that's, I think, probably where you're going with that, is that tough love is, if you can remove yourself from it, that person that loves you the most, that coach, maybe it was your high school basketball coach or whatever it may be, And so, but what advice would you have for that person like me and like others probably listen to this, that I have a really hard time getting in your face and having that challenging conversation because I just don't want to be that guy, right? I've had that in the past and I didn't enjoy it all the time.
Absolutely. So yeah, you're tracking with with what I was sharing, and that makes total sense. I think in my way, and we're talking about deep change here and beliefs that often that people who say I want to be liked, I want to be a good guy, good person, they do that out of a sense of care, right? Like I care about my people, I care about my friends, care about my clients, and I think that's even worth challenging. If you're watching someone fail, struggle, continuously make the same mistake, and you avoid talking to them about that or challenging that
Yeah.
behavior, do you actually care about that person?
Yeah.
Like, that's a good question.
Absolutely.
So does ignoring or avoiding discomfort, is that actually for the benefit of the other person, or is that the benefit of you?
Yeah. Of you and your emotions and your feelings.
Yeah.
But I
You know,
think it takes
saying,
more of doing it, right? I've had to get better at it over the years because the more you do it, then the bigger your comfort zone gets, right? First couple times it's really hard, gets easier, gets a little bit easier, right? Then it kind of can become not quote unquote normal, because then I think maybe you just don't even care if you're not giving it any thought.
that's
That's your
right.
whole bull in a china shop thing, right?
Exactly. Right. And so what typically happens is, or a common pattern is that people feel reluctant to get into a difficult conversation, reluctant to challenge or confront. And so it's a steady stream of pleasantries and niceness, and I'm here for you and I can support you and let's think about this differently and let's try that. And then it doesn't work and the volcano blows, and then it flips from being, Brett's a great guy to something. What did Brett just say to? I mean, I've never heard Brett talk like that before. That's not healthy, and that's also not helpful. And I want to build on this a little bit more and actually talk about a technique. I was writing a newsletter article about this not too long ago, and I was framing it in the concept of EQ, emotional intelligence. That it's very. I mean, it kind of it goes in waves a little bit of popularity, but I think it's pretty well accepted as a key part of success in today's world. It drives me crazy that most people think of rainbows and butterflies when they think of EQ, that it's flowery, it's nice, it's about warmth and connection and intimacy. It's about all that and more. And because that word care is ultimately an EQ sort of concept, right? Care doesn't mean that you intellectually think someone else is a good person. It means that you feel a sense of warmth for them, and you want them to do well. It's an emotional based phenomenon with people. And so again,
Can I
if
interrupt
you really,
just real quick? Sorry, I hate
please,
interrupting people, but
of course.
so let's talk about IQ, EQ. I want to continue down your EQ road here. So just give us the 15-second version of the way I explain IQ. You would probably do a much better job than I, but how much information can I process how fast, right? EQ is how much emotion can I process in how fast, short amount of time. Is that fair?
Yeah.
For those that maybe not follow EQ.
That's also just not that's just the tip of the iceberg. So this all comes out of this body of work called the theory of multiple intelligences, because essentially, like when you and I were younger, people would think there's one form of intelligence, and that would be what people talk about now as cognitive intelligence, right? Taking tests and SATs and standardized exams. And IQ test is where really that started. And that's one form of intelligence, but there's been a tremendous amount of work done on developing other forms of intelligence. So emotional intelligence, right? Emotional awareness, capacity, fluency, ability to influence others through an emotional engagement. That there's a mastery of that, which is, it's not better or worse than traditional IQ, but it's just a different realm. People also have written about social intelligence. I mean, you're in sales, and I work with a lot of people, and so I'm in my own form of sales. You have to have massive social intelligence to be effective in sales. You can't be blind to that and have no social skills at all. And then there are other forms of intelligence too, but that's the sort of body of work that this comes from.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Absolutely. So the idea of like this, tough love approach to people, having a range of experiences with people in EQ, I think is absolutely crucial and essential. Now, I want to get to more of a specific technique, because I think this is where the rubber meets the road. Now, recognize, back to what I was saying about deep change, if your beliefs don't change along with this, it doesn't matter, right? Because you'll try it once and, discard it and never use it again, because it has to be anchored in something deeper. You have to see your role as someone who is engaging with people, both in the positive, favorable experiences and the negative, challenging ones as well. But thinking out loud, I have found to be an incredible tool in becoming more conversant and effective with emotional intelligence. So thinking out loud. So when a lot of people make a decision about, like, you're getting this promotion or I'm awarding you this opportunity, they tend to just deliver the results. Like, a body of people made this decision, or, I decided you're getting promoted and here you go. Or I've decided you're not getting something and, I'll talk to you in a month. Whereas I think the ability to, rather than that, explain the broader process. What were the factors involved? What were the intellectual frameworks I went through, or the decision-making frameworks to come up with this? What were some of the dilemmas that I encountered when trying to make this decision? What are some of the risks or concerns moving forward about what to do? And to give people the whole arc of the story is a way of really engaging in a more deep, thoughtful, and engaging experience that gives people access to a full range of issues. And I found that to be an incredibly effective technique. You want me to give you a quick example of this?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was recently working with an organization where the leader had lost somebody at a high level, and it was positive change, but moved on to a different situation and had to replace that role in his organization. And it's a very important role, and nobody was fully qualified to do this. So there were two main candidates, and neither of which was really ready. And so the leader had to make a decision, and made the decision in consultation with me and in coaching, went one direction, and then was extremely worried about what the person who didn't get the promotion was going to think, feel, and do. It was like it was a retention concern, right? Seeing this person as a flight risk in the organization. So my advice in this work, and what we crafted, was a way to share this information with the person who didn't get the role, right? This is the conversation he didn't look forward to having, in a way that was going to be fair and honest, but also reduce the risk of this person just deciding to leave the organization. And then he's got one person promoted, and he's just got another hole he has to fill that's going to be problematic in a different way. And so we talked about this, and he had to put together a presentation, not really like a formal presentation, but kind of like have his thoughts laid out here about what the situation was in the organization, how this was a dilemma that when no one was ready fully to move into this role, that he had selected the other individual because the other individual had shown more openness to growth in the time that he had been there. Let that individual know that he was worried that he might leave. So he's telling the person who might leave, I'm worried you might leave. That's a concern. But I had to make a values-based decision. And one of our key values is growth. And the other person had demonstrated more growth and a desire to work on that moving forward. And so that was the kind of delivery that was not easy to go through. I don't know if I'd say it was super well received. The person receiving it was not happy to hear that news, felt dejected in some ways, but he stayed, and he stayed because he was told the honest truth. There was authenticity in the communication. There was vulnerability displayed by the top leader in the organization. And ultimately, the person receiving the message said, I could work a lot of places where I get disappointing news, where I don't get what I want, but I probably can't find a lot of other places where I'm going to have this kind of relationship with my manager or my boss. I'll stay. I want to make this work.
Yeah. Well, I think that's huge. I mean, you said the words too that I was thinking: the transparency, the vulnerability, right? Just the brutal honesty. And if you don't want to hear it, then you're probably not values aligned and don't want to be here anyway, And so I have found that too as a leader, just being transparent from the get go. And people that listen to this know I always talk about the fear question. How many of the fears we put in our mind blow up to the magnitude we put in our mind to be? Never, right? So if I'm going into a tough situation and I don't want to have this conversation, I literally will ask myself the question I ask all the podcast people, Brett. The fears never blow up to the magnitude we put them in our mind to be. So what you're thinking right now is actually not going to go happen. So let's go have the conversation, and it will be better than you think it will be. And that mental change for me has been a game changer when I'm walking into a situation I don't necessarily want to be walking into. So when you hear
That's
that,
right.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's funny. When I first came out of grad school, I was a big fan of what's the right way to say this? Like, um,
You can cuss if you need to. I'm just kidding.
yeah, exactly. Uh, well, so I don't want to get too technical, but there was this whole body of work done in the '50s called Theory Y, and the notion was that uh, people historically are viewed with kind of pessimism, right? Like people are lazy and people are
Yeah.
they're going to do the bare minimum. So kind of flip that into Theory Y, which is people want to do great work and have the best intent and sort of see the positive in them. And I think there's a lot of that. I absolutely do continue to believe, but I have I think maybe landed in a little more of a middle point there, where I recognize that fear is usually in most people stronger than courage, at least initially. And that in the absence, in an information vacuum, people tend to assume the worst. And that, we do, our natural state is to have a deficit orientation. And a lot of that's based on survival, survival skills. And I think that's what, decades of brain neuroscience research has shown, is that the fight, flight, or freeze part of our brains, the amygdala, are in charge more often than we think or would want. And so that's informed a lot of my thinking about this duality of tough love and communication with people, because one painful, miserable confrontation after another is going to eventually put people into what feels like a survival state.
Yeah,
and
right.
when people are in survival states, they don't tend to make good decisions, or certainly not good long-term decisions, because everything is narrowed and focused on surviving the moment. So I think the ability to build trust with people, to create psychological safety in relationships, to know people's intentions are right, and then be able to bring into that confrontation, challenge, and intensity, that is incredibly powerful. But I think a lot of people who are successful entrepreneurs, who have gone through a lot of the experiences you've described, where there's more comfort and discomfort, you sort of work the muscle of challenge and confrontation, forget that the majority of people are really in a state of fear much of the time. And the ability to create the right conditions for people to look beyond that fear and operate from a different perspective and point of view is really essential.
Yeah. Well, what's something there? Maybe there's nothing, but my guess is there will be. Is there anything that, like, to your core, you believe this to be true based on the 20 plus years of experience of working with highly successful people, that you believe it to your core, but when you're out talking to people and maybe even a new client, that they don't believe it yet, but it continues to come up, but for a fact in your mind, this is true?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Yes. So let me try to explain this in a way that doesn't get too complicated. If it does, interrupt me again, and we'll get back on track. Uh, there are times in life where uh, either or is the right way to look at making a decision. People call that a binary choice. Like if you're running an organization and you're going to expand your offices, you're either going to open a new location or you're not. There's no middle ground in that. It's either or. Um, then there's a whole field of decisions that are both and, that are not binary, either or. It's not like, you think of someone building a financial advisory career, and someone says, do you want to add new clients or serve your existing book of business? You can't pick one, right? Like, you don't get to only go with one. And you and I both know from being around the block, if you pick one and ignore the other, you're going to pay a serious price at some point in the future. So when you're talking about like what are absolute convictions that I have, and when I'm dealing with clients, what do I maybe know in my bones that even if my clients don't agree with me, I just go, okay, he's going to get the message. Might take 6 months, but it's coming.
Right, exactly.
It would be in this realm of applying an either or decision to a both and need. So, lots of examples, but think of like, employees need to be supported and they need to be challenged. Clients need to be supported, need to be challenged. And when I talk to my clients about one of those being missing and they tell me it's not a big deal or it's not right, I know there is a ticking time bomb that's going to explode. Yeah. There is a landmine that's been buried that's going to blow.
It's called job security for you, because it may take you for a while to figure that one out, for him or her to figure that out, right? And
yes.
And what you're saying, I'm tracking 100% what you're saying and agree, and it makes me go back to, again, a saying I think I heard back in my 20s, but the importance of a relationship, right? If you're my coach, I have to trust you. I have to respect you. We have to have this relationship, because without that relationship, any accountability is harassment.
Yep.
So if we don't have that, and now you want to challenge me, it's not going to go well, right? So when you hear that, thoughts on that perspective?
Yeah, well, that's that's actually a perfect example of what we've been talking about, and I was sharing just a moment ago that being in that kind of situation with clients, it's a big deal to challenge someone's results, their behaviors, their beliefs.
Yeah.
And especially in situations, professional situations where people are doing work they really care about, it can feel very, very hard to be confronted with those types of experiences and conversations. So to not have a platform of trust and connection, and to make that message, it just comes across as extraordinarily self-oriented.
Yeah.
And one thing I know about the trusted advisor content, the trust equation, and maybe some of your listeners are familiar with that trusted advisor material, is when people sense that the interaction that they're having with you is all for their benefit and not for yours, they tune you out. It just destroys any amount of trust, credibility, and connection. And that's when people come across as just being, self-oriented, greedy, ogres.
Yeah.
At that point, you have no influence on the other individual, and your life just became, 5 to 10 times harder.
Yeah. So let me ask this last question for you. We could talk about this stuff for 3 more hours, I'm sure. No doubt about it. What's the thing for you in 2024 that you look at that we have to embrace again? Whether that I think you mentioned earlier, Chat GPT, is virtual reality. Like what is something exciting for you in the business world that you're in now that you're just like, I can't wait in 2024 to be working on this type of stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a big time. It's a scary time. It's an intense time. I feel like we're really on the cusp of a lot of big transformations in our society. I think it's also not at all clear, what that's going to mean in some ways that I think are exciting and frightening at the same
Yeah.
time. I think, I've been very fortunate to, through some of my client work, just part of the world that I live in, to have, a fair amount of access to cutting edge technology, artificial intelligence. I'm a big believer. I pay a lot of attention to Scott Galloway, who is an author and podcaster as well, a faculty member at NYU, and his take on AI is that your job's not going to get replaced by AI. It's likely to get replaced by someone who knows how to use AI.
Mm.
And so I think that's a big case for not fighting that sort of technology, but rather mastering it.
Yeah.
And I think that what that ultimately is going to do is make intelligence less valuable in a relationship. So there was a time where I felt like my ability to educate people was an extremely valuable part of the work I was doing. And that's just not the case anymore. I mean, right now, obviously, anybody who's aware and plugged in knows that they can simply, Google search things and find what they're looking for. But my experiences with ChatGPT, other forms of AI, and what's beginning to approach generative AI, really means that I can acquire at a moment's notice curated and customized intelligence. If I want to know the best way to deliver a performance review, I can get something that is not only the best thinking out there, but that's exactly tailored to my situation, just by entering some prompts into an AI search engine.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing, what I think a lot of people, whether they're coaches or consultants or in any kind of relationship business, are going to be doing is connecting with people in ways that are powerfully transformative through relationship. And the work almost takes on a spiritual quality. And I don't mean this as, religious sort of way, that, people are going to be talking about scriptures or something that they would do in a house of worship, but helping people with meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
And the whole realm of exploration and inquiry that is historically not a big part of professional development. Acquiring knowledge, content, and skills is going to be the easy part or the quick part, but helping people define who they are, see their role in the world, and begin to operationalize that, I think that's the work.
Yeah.
And what gets me excited about the engagements with my clients now is that they don't really need me to talk about the value of feedback or to explain so much, what these different change methodologies really mean. They really want and need me to help make all these things real for them, to personalize them, and to make them an active player in the game of their life. And, not only I think that's an exciting challenge, but it's so much more rewarding.
Yeah.
It's so much more rewarding for me. When someone tells me I'm, smart or, clever or whatever, thanks, I guess. But when somebody says like, you're a deeply caring person who's changed my life.
Mm.
Wow. I mean, it
Yeah.
almost brings me to tears just saying that right now.
Right.
And it's that kind of impact on clients that I think is not only rewarding, but I think it's becoming the deal moving
Yeah.
forward.
I love that answer, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think if to your point earlier, I think you said it's not AI is not going to take your job. It's the person that knows how to use it that's going to take your job, right? So couldn't agree more, man. Where do listeners find more of David Schectman? Where do we send them?
Yes, wonderful. So evolution.team, that is the website for my firm. And my biography, along with all of my colleagues, exists on that site, as well as plenty of information about the kind of work we do and
Awesome.
other resources. I'm excited to engage with people who are looking to do deep change.
I love it, man. Great stuff. Thanks for being with me, David. It was great catching up with you, man. Thanks for being on the Circuit of Success.
You too. Thanks, Brett.